positive, did all my surgeries, and just here for support of other people.
Perfect. Thank you for joining. Toby?
Hi. I joined BRCA Strong when Tracy was first diagnosed, helping with bringing in new sponsors and going out into the community and asking them if they know or if they even were ever tested for BRCA. Most people don't even know what you're talking about. So I'm here to help, and anything I could do, you could always reach out to me, and Tracy will give you my phone number. I'm always here to listen.
Thank you. Vanessa, if you don't mind to do a short 30-second introduction. Oh, hold on 1 second.
On mute.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Vanessa. 3 years cancer survivor, HER2 positive. And yeah, it's challenging being young and being a cancer survivor, but I'm grateful and I'm here for you guys.
Thank you for joining. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Tracy?
Okay, yeah, I'm not muted. I found out 10 years ago I was BRCA1 positive and was planning on having my preventative surgeries this fall, and then in May, instead, I got diagnosed with triple negative breast cancer. So instead of being preventative surgeries, next month they'll be to get the rest of the cancer out for whatever chemo doesn't get. I'm going through chemo now with Dr. Calfa. So
Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for coming on. And after the call, I'd love to connect with you. We're sending out packages right now, and I'll go over details with you and give you some more information. If you ever need anything, we're more than happy to help you.
awesome, thank you.
You're welcome.
And
Myra?
this is
Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Myra Lima. I am a nurse practitioner in breast oncology, as well as a triple negative breast cancer survivor for 14 years, 16 years. Okay.
Thank you.
And I'm here for everybody.
Thank you for joining. Tracy, go ahead. You were going to introduce somebody else with you.
Yeah, this is my mom.
Hi.
She is also BRCA1 positive. Had the preventative surgeries 10 years ago.
10 years ago.
And she's here helping with my kids while I go through treatment.
You're local in South Florida, I'm assuming, right?
Yep.
Oh,
She's not. No, she lives in Maryland.
I live in Maryland, so I haven't been home for 5 months.
Great support system. So what I'm going to do is I'll start and introduce myself. I'm Tracy Milgram, the founder of BRCA Strong, where we empower, educate, inspire, and advocate survivors, and thrivers to eliminate the feeling of isolation and help you feel whole again. We do that by doing transformational photo shoots, fashion shows, medical panels, but due to COVID-19, obviously all of our events have been put on hold, and we're mailing out care packages to women who are just diagnosed, getting ready for surgery, or going through the process. So if you or your family member would like a package, you can reach out to myself or Kate, one of our board members that's on the call tonight. You can feel free to send us a message and we'll be happy to mail out a package to you. So what we'll do is we could just have some small conversation for now, and in a couple minutes, we'll go ahead and get started as Dr. Calfa's ready. So tonight we're going to talk about clinical trials, which is a new topic for BRCA Strong, but I'm a firm believer in clinical trials as I participated in one myself and also work in the field of clinical trials and feel very strongly on joining a clinical trial to help yourself and to help other women. And that's how we get really true advancements in our medical community of different technologies and different medicines available to us for our treatment options. So when the call gets started, Dr. Calfa obviously dig a little more into it, but just how I feel so strongly, on the clinical trials and making a difference, because medications come all the time. I was diagnosed pre-Angelina Jolie in 2004, so there really was no medications or clinical trials out. Sure enough, I just found out in 1994, the BRCA gene was discovered. So just 10 years later after being diagnosed, there really wasn't all these clinical trials and centers. So not only, you know, just carrying the gene, but if you don't have the gene and you're just diagnosed with triple negative or HER2 or one of these other mutations that are being found, you know, let's continue to help and develop as much as we can and make a difference in our world of treatments. I know personally, I feel, like I said, strongly about them. And if anybody has any questions, I'm more than happy to help you. In the clinical trial that I participated in, I actually found on clinicaltrials.gov before it was even in South Florida. So, you know, going on and researching all the clinical trials, there's definitely options and there's definitely places to go. And there's huge centers like Dr. Calfa has, you know, just being able to share this information and share the knowledge to everybody. So good evening, Dr. Calfa. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We look forward to hearing all this amazing information on clinical trials and why women should participate, because I know a lot of feedback I get, you know, when you tell women clinical trials, it's like, why? Where do I go? What's going to happen? So I look forward to learning more about it tonight from your standpoint. And thank you so much for your time and dedication and your team coming on.
Thank you, Tracy, and hi, everybody. I just love, lots of people are the one I spent the day with already, you know, and Mara, she sacrificed her time, and I said to Mara, you stay and finish the clinic. I'll get in the car and just try to get home so I can at least be home. I connect with you all, and Tracy and her mom and Vanessa, you know, so I don't know. I think there are going to be more people coming along. But it's lovely to see you all, and it's just nice to see how each one of you had said that you're here to support the other person. And I think, you know, in a way, breast cancer just brings that with all its ugliness in so many ways, it just brings the beauty in everyone. And I say that there's nothing pink about breast cancer, but there's something pink about everyone that is affected by, you know, because pink is really a beautiful color, and it's just supposed to symbolize something really positive. And I think the positive is the fact that we get the strength and we get the courage and we get each other to really get everything that we have within us and fight it, you know, and just and make it somehow a positive journey. There is not one of you that I know, and not one of the patients that I've seen through now more than a decade of being a breast oncologist, that hasn't come out from this stronger and more beautiful somehow. And it's amazing. I just can't believe it. And I said I was going to do a project. I just never had time to take a picture on the day when the person comes, and then take one in the middle of their chemo, even after the chemotherapy, when they have no eyelashes and no hair and all that, and you see that spark and you see that glow. There's just something that this journey, when you pull yourself out after you cry and you throw yourself on the floor and you say, why me, and all that, for those that do say that, and for some, the acceptance happened quicker, but the thoughts are still there. You know, could you have done something to prevent it? Could you have done that surgery earlier? Could you have done any of that? And the thing is, we can't change the past, you know, but you can act for the present, and you can change the future with what you're doing in present. So I want you to know, and I think you know by now, that I spare no efforts to give everyone the best chance of being, you know, the exception to whatever rules and norms and statistics we read, right? So you're always going to find that stage 1 has a 90% chance of cure, or almost 100%, and then stage 2 has an 80 to 90%, and stage 3 goes to less than that, and stage 4, in general, in stage 4, you try not to put the wrong hope in somebody's mind. And, you know, the treatment is usually given with palliative intent, meaning you don't usually go for aggressively, like when you go for cure, you know, you go a lot more aggressively than when in stage 4 you try to make your efforts sustain and constant, but at the same time to use your drugs judiciously, because now they have to last a lifelong. So the goal of treatments in stage 0 to 3 are a little different than 4. But whenever I see somebody, I try to give to imagine and remember the best case scenario of that patient in that group, in that category, and then to really reach for that best possibility. And that's where research comes into play, honestly. I didn't plan this segue to it, but when you think about the way we got where we are today is really through dedicated women that when they're given an opportunity to either take the standard of care or to embark into a research, trial, then their decision was to really take the leap of faith and go on the trial. And some trials are positive and they change the way we do things in the terms of adding new drugs, and some trials are negative and they show that adding a new drug doesn't help. But it's through this research that over the last 3 decades, there's a 40% chance of dying from breast cancer than it was 30 years ago. So obviously research works, right? And I want to talk to you all about, number one, to find out, there's a lot of misconception about research, and there's a lot of people saying, I don't want to be a guinea pig. I don't want to get placebo. I don't want to, why would I risk something bad to happen to me? And I just want to maybe go over the couple of principles in research, and then for some of you that are on the call that I know your stories, and some maybe I don't know fully the story, just to emphasize the principles of research, because at Sylvester we're dedicated to bringing the research from the lab. And fortunately, in between residency and fellowship, when I was pregnant, and we're just women on the call, but back then there was less support for women to go through pregnancy and become hematology oncology fellows. And probably the dirtiest looks I used to get were not from men, but were from women colleagues. However, it wasn't, so I was pregnant in between residency and fellowship, and it was a year where I said, I was given the option to really join the research in the lab and get an appreciation for what it takes to move something from the concept phase to really the first phase of a clinical trial, the second, the third, and all that. So from that lab, I can tell you that it takes an idea, and then you want to have, a model that replicates that. And initially you try to grow those cells and then put them in an animal model and see what happened to the animal model. And I had to catch mice, and I had to inject them in the tail, and I can catch a mice if you pay me. But I guess for the research, I was able to hold the mouse and give them the injection, the tumor cells in their tail, and have a tumor grow in their chest, and then, analyze and see what works and what doesn't. Then, interestingly enough, I was always fascinated by breast cancer for many reasons. It just affects the women, which I can relate, so well to. And I find that the woman is the center of every household universe somehow. Said it or not said it, but I think that's the case. And they tend to be compliant, and they tend to want to be alive forever. So, and you bond relationships that nothing else is like that. So obviously it was a natural fit for me. And then breast cancer was just something that it looks so promising because it's very common. It affects, obviously, next year, I just saw the statistics, and we used to talk about 270,000 a year. We're almost at 300,000 a year women that will be diagnosed with breast cancer. And we still don't have a vaccine to prevent that from happening. So we'll talk about primary prevention, secondary prevention, and all that. But just going from the animal model to the phase 1, it's been now 15 years since that concept in the lab happened. And it was only 2 years ago when those molecules were making it to the clinic. So it takes a lot of time, but that time is used carefully. And, it's so censored and so many regulations in place that usually when you get to the phase 1, that's first in human, right? So at Sylvester, we do have a phase 1 clinic, and we're the only one on the East Coast of South Florida that has the phase 1. And that means that anything that has passed the lab and the animal model and it looks like promising and you have all these predictions that it's going to work, then you start your phase 1, and that's first in humans. And you check those that don't even have a drug name, and you check them in people that have no other options, right? So they're basically desperate, and they're in between having no option or having something that is promising, but it was never tried in humans. And you see this, you know, sometimes you see these miracles happening, and that's how these ideas get moved on from the first patient to the second. And the phase 1s are very, very highly regulated. And you go initially with 3 patients, you check their dose. And the only thing you're looking in that phase 1 is to make sure that it's safe. And you check to see what dose they can tolerate the most. So the idea is only to figure out what dose can you use. So you go with the highest tolerated dose, and now with the lowest. So you go and you push your limits, and you push your limits, and you push your limits. And then when you see the side effects, you say, oh, okay, that's how much they can tolerate. And that's when you get the dose. Many people wonder, how do you know to give me like 300 milligrams of something? That's how it starts. And now from there, then you have a phase 1, and then you get the signal that you got the dose. And then you're like, it didn't do much harm, but now I have a dose, I can move on to a phase 1B and then to a phase 2. So then in the phase 2, which you already see the studies, you know, being not so censored and not so, the phase 1 usually functions really in a hospital setting. So it's almost like an ICU type of monitoring with, you know, frequent blood work and vital signs, and the whole team is after the patient. And it's just a very careful monitoring, because you don't know what toxicity these drugs have. And then you go on to the phase 2, where you already figure out the dose, and you try to see how effective that is. And when you go to the phase 2, in general, you go to the stage 4 first, again, just like the phase 1. And you're trying to prove the concept in stage 4. And the reason is the patient lives with a cancer. So it's an easy assessment of effectiveness. If the patient has liver or bone metastases and you give a drug that is effective, the next scan is going to show that those metastases are either gone or shrunk, or they haven't grown. So that's when you know something is effective. And that's usually the approval that's given by the FDA. It's usually an approval for the stage 4 first. So that's how you're going to hear that the medications that some of you are on, you know, even the tamoxifen, even the aromatase inhibitors, the Nerlings, the Herceptin, everything was studied first in stage 4. And then from there on, when you know it works in somebody that is with cancer and you're able to visualize that, then it gets moved into the curative setting. And in the curative setting, some patients have the chemo beforehand. And, you know, Tracy, you said it. So the things that you shared on this call, I'll say, but the things that you haven't said, I won't say, even if you're spending the rest of the life with us here on the call because of HIPAA. I will just use or say only the information that any of you have provided. But so when chemotherapy is given before surgery in the curative setting, then you have the opportunity to really evaluate the response just like you would in an advanced stage in stage 4. But the approval obviously was given for stage 4 and now it's moved to stage 2 or 3. So it's moved to stage 2 or 3 when clinical trials are done because the cancer is still in there or not. If the patient is receiving chemo before surgery, then you can visualize the response. And it helps you obviously to see that it's effective, and it helps you to know that if it's not effective, you just stop it and you go on to the next set of drugs or you take it to surgery. If you give a treatment after surgery, like Ibrance is now studied, right, in stage 2 or 3, you have to go blindly. The surgery took the cancer out. The person is by definition cancer-free. So when you have a cancer-free state, how do you know something is effective? Well, you know something is effective by not having the patient have a recurrence ever again. That's how you know it's effective, right? So if you have a clinical trial that give aspirin to patients that were treated with curative intent for a stage 2 or 3, either estrogen receptor positive or triple negative, now there's a clinical trial that gives aspirin. So how do you know the aspirin was effective? Well, The way you know is the cancer never comes back, and then you know your treatments were all effective, right? Could it have been that without aspirin, the response would have been the same? Sure. Could it be that the patient that has surgery up front doesn't need any chemo, doesn't need anything else, and all she needs was that surgery? Sure. But it's impossible to tell who's the person out of who are the few in 100 that will have that reoccurrence. And because of that, you're giving all these treatments, to minimize that chance and to hope that none of them in 100 will ever recur. And that will mean you cure 100% of the patients. So I want to pause for a second and see if I have lost anyone so far. And if anybody has any questions up to now. I don't see you all on the phone. I just see Myra's beautiful face. But when I'm on the phone, I don't see all of you. So I'm just gonna try to connect to the computer while I'm asking any questions that you may have so far, just from what I said. We still have people on the call? Tracy, I just want to make sure that you ladies can hear
Yes,
me.
everybody's still on the call. Sorry, I was muted. There's 12
No, it's okay.
on the call.
You guys still hear me, right?
Yes,
You're
everybody can hear you. Does anybody have any questions so far? If you do, you can feel free to unmute yourself or you can raise your hand.
Yeah, you can raise your hand. You can write on the chat if you feel like that's better for you. And then I will continue telling you the rest of it. But I just wanted to make sure that I haven't lost you in the conversation. It's
Nope.
no. So Tracy, I'm on the other one. I'm gonna leave this meeting, and you can let me go.
Yes, perfect. I put you in.
Yeah. Okay. So let's see. So much better if I get to see you all. It's not like the phone is funny. It doesn't give you that perception, and it's just not the same thing. Okay, so now I can spot. If you ladies are napping, I can pick on you. Let's see. Where is the little one? Is that Henry? That's the baby girl?
Yes, this is Sadie. Henry is.
Hey! Oh, I see her now. She had a bottle. I wasn't sure. Hi, baby, sweetie. You're the youngest member of this team tonight. Okay. So what questions do you have about clinical trials? What do you want to know? There's so much, but what do you want to know?
You know, one question that I get a lot from a lot of women is like placebo versus drug. Like, why would they want to do it? Like, I spoke with somebody today and I was telling her to look into clinical trials. She's BRCA positive and she is triple negative.
Yeah. That's perfect that you asked that question, Tracy. So, the placebo in stage 4. So you use the new combination or the new single drug against whatever standard of care is. Okay, so that's the comparison. So you compare to standard of care. So if the standard of care would be giving nothing, then that could be a placebo comparison. So that's why in a stage 4 advanced cancer, where there's no other treatment to be tried, then the new one could be compared to placebo, right? But in a curative setting, you will never compare to a placebo by itself. The way you build up your treatment is if the best chemotherapy that you have right now is adriamycin, Cytoxan, and Taxol, right? Then the person in the study will receive at least the standard of care. So it will be adriamycin, Cytoxan, and Taxol will be your control. And then if you want to try to see how carboplatinum, for instance, helps the combination, then you would be adriamycin, Cytoxan, Taxol plus placebo versus Adriamycin, Cytoxan, Taxol plus carbo. So yes, you could be randomized to placebo, but that placebo should be added to whatever the standard of care is. So nobody should receive in a study less than standard of care. There are some studies looking now what we call de-escalation, meaning we're trying to see, does everyone need that much chemo? You know, so now we're moving, and those studies are even trickier because when you know you have a combination that is very, very, very effective with a very high cure rate, removing something from that, at the end of the study, you may come up to the conclusion, well, we shouldn't have removed it. That's the trickier one, okay? Because we just learned that the combination for HER2 positive, right? Vanessa, you said you had treatment for HER2 positive. So now there is a study that looked at TCHP, which is 4 drugs, to only 2, only the T and an H. So when you know that TCHP cure more than 90%, are you gonna go for TH, you know? And maybe that's all you need. And fortunately, the studies show that it was equally effective for some women with very small cancers. But at that point, you take the chance of maybe not having enough treatment. And I always counsel the patients towards that. But it would be fit for somebody, for instance, that is older and doesn't want to take the whole treatment. And she's like 75 and she can't wait for me to say, you may get a chance of having less chemo. There is another one where you can, and research is always, it's essential to be done, but it's always a risk and benefit. And it's always a risk for the person that participates, you know, as much as there is a benefit, a potential benefit. So if the person decides that she wants to go for the 2 drugs instead of the 4 drugs, the risk is that maybe she didn't get all the chemo that she needed, but the benefit is that she's gonna be only half as sick as she was with the 4 drugs. So it's a risk and benefit. The radiation, it's relevant to this group, I know. So the radiation used to be 6.5 weeks for everyone. And now there's protocols that were done, and the Canadians were braver, and they probably were able to do it easier, that they got now the Canadian protocol that is only 3 weeks, right? So when you move from 6 to 3, you say, well, is it as good as the 6? Am I getting enough radiation? When they move from whole breast radiation to just a partial breast radiation, meaning they don't radiate the whole breast, the question is it gonna be enough? Should I have done the whole breast radiation? It always comes with pluses and minuses, and the risk and the benefit is always discussed there. But there's one important thing about this research. You know, the reason we go into larger studies, and the reason we go into we play with the chances of somebody being cured by offering a clinical trial, is because there has to be something very, very strongly present in terms of the scientific evidence. And just like when you have a simulator and you go and you fly a plane with a simulator and all that, you know, there is a very high chance that the results will be as expected. But nothing is a standard of care, and nothing goes in the book, and nothing gets prescribed to somebody else unless it goes through this tedious phase 1 and 2 and 3 research. And then, like for instance, we have some very promising, excuse me, 1 second. Somebody sent me an article, I already saw that article this morning. But I was gonna say that when you look at adding a drug, right? So you have a combination of 4 drugs versus 5 drugs, right? So then you say, well, it's not standard of care yet. The studies are ongoing. What's to lose and what's to gain? When you look that you potentially can gain a 10 or 15% of having a complete response that translates into a cure rate that is significantly higher, then you say, what's my risk? And then you say, well, my risk is getting sick and that, and the risk is like a 1% of getting significantly sick versus a 10% chance of having a complete response. That means a higher chance for cure. Then you make a decision. The one essential thing is to really do research in places that they do it well and they're credentialed and they meet the highest standards in operating and doing the research at the highest level, you know, and then not have small studies that are generated by very small, you know, entities and companies that don't necessarily have a strong record in doing and conducting, you know, reputable research. So that's why the National Cancer Institute, right? So now Sylvester is the 71 cancer center that is NCI designated. When NCI gives this designation, it's just because they look at all the processes and they basically veto the processes, the research infrastructure, and the quality of the work that gets done. But I always offer the patients the standard and then the research that is the option. And like the vaccine trial that we have right now. So you have trials that are given after you finish all your treatment. Like you finish everything for cure. And your treatment hasn't been altered. It's the same like if you didn't go. And at the time of the completion, there is an opportunity to go on a vaccine. Like Vanessa, you asked me today, is there a vaccine? I want to know, I want to do more. Because, you know, even whatever the chance of cure is, as long as it's not 100%, it's still in people's minds. And you always wonder, any pain and any ache and anything you ever have, could this be, you know, a recurrence? And you hear all these stories. And of course, only those stories you hear on TV. You're not going to hear the zillion of people that were cured and never heard the breast cancer word again. You hear about the wife of the actor or the wife of so-and-so, and you hear the bad story that the cancer came back, right? So statistically speaking, a third of the cancers put all together will come back. And that's not negligible. And it goes from lower the chance with the stage 1 to higher the chance with more advanced stage. But, you know, there is always a chance. So the question is, can you add to what you're doing to minimize that chance? And that's what you want to do, to minimize and bring it as low as you can. And either through that, you know, the research was done not only in terms of drugs, it's also the vaccines, which is looking at making the immune system recognize the cancer cells. That's a task that we haven't mastered. So the immune system doesn't recognize the cancer cells. It's almost like pepper spray in the security guard eyes. That's how I say it. It's just like somebody comes to the house and knocks off your security guard, and then it's in the house having a blast. If you're able to recognize the immune system, to recognize the cancer cells and able to go get them, then you'll have this surveillance done for you. Somebody will work for you. That's your immune system. But how do you make those cells recognizable? And that's what the vaccines are doing. So for triple negative, we have a vaccine now in the clinical trials. And it's through a DoD grant. So the Department of Defense looked at the initial data and they looked at the initial 22 patients that were on the phase 1 and said, it looks great, it's safe. And then they funded $13 million to really make this vaccine available in a phase 2 throughout the country. And we're one of the sites. So now you're giving this vaccine or placebo. And why can the patient get placebo? Because the standard of care is nothing, right? So it's a fair comparison. It's nothing, which will be the standard, versus this vaccine in combination with some immune modulators. And that hopefully will make the cells identifiable by the immune system, will increase the cure rate. We don't know. We don't have the proof that that's the case. So patients are on the study. They're going on as we speak. There are 107 women on it. The study is looking at 280. If we complete the study, and we will, you know, in 2 to 3 years, we'll have results. If the results show that getting the vaccine keeps the cancer away, then everybody will get the vaccine. And I don't know if you pay attention, Tracy, because I know you're playing with SETI. I know you're not playing, but you know, this is something relevant, and that's why, of course, we'll talk more about it. But this is the folate receptor vaccine study that was on channel, I don't know if it was channel 10 or another channel recently. And patients give testimonies about how tolerable this is. I don't even know anything about it. They come and they get it and just like get a couple of vaccines once a month for 6 months, and then they go on boosters, just like you get with hepatitis. And that's after somebody completes the whole chemo, the whole surgery, the whole radiation, the whole thing, and this is the vaccine. So that's in the curative setting. And this is a vaccine for secondary prevention, meaning the cancer had happened and now you're preventing the recurrence. That's the goal. And then we're also working on, I wish it was as close as this one, but we're also working on a primary prevention vaccine where people will get the vaccine to hopefully never develop the breast cancer. So as others are working on the COVID vaccine, you know, they're the same group at Mayo Clinic that had been funded this DoD grant, and we're partnered with them, had worked on the DCIS. You ladies know the DCIS is the pre-cancer, is the stage 0, is the pre-invasive cancer. So they gave the vaccine to the pre-cancer, and the pre-cancer never transformed into cancer, actually went away. So that's a proof of concept that it's effective and is doable, and they're just putting a lot more work into that. And then the question is, can you do the vaccine even before the pre-cancer happened? So hopefully we'll live to be old ladies and you see all this, like you saw the BRCA gene, you know, from 1994 to now. Look how many other genes we know about. And look, somebody said on the call that, you know, the BRCA gene, you still talk to people and they still don't know what that is. And it's true. There's still people every single day in my office and say, what's that? And they can't tell the difference in between the genetic of the cancer and the genetic of the person, you know. Oh, I had genetic testing, my oncotype was low risk. That's not your genes, that's the cancer genes. There's still so much education that needs to happen, and through ladies like you, this is just gonna become the language that people speak. And when they're gonna go to their primary care and gynecologists, they're gonna be advocating for themselves, because unfortunately, healthcare is not going the right way. And unfortunately, primary care physicians don't have more time than they used to have. They actually have less time to even take your family history properly. So just knowing that maternal and paternal side is equally important. 3 generations up are equally important. There are more genes than just the BRCA gene. There are the PALB gene, the PALB B2 gene, STIC, P53, CDH1, the Lynch syndrome. I mean, we test for 83 genes now, and we don't have an action plan for every single one of them, but we can definitely quantify the risk better and put the women on a higher surveillance plan, and maybe use some drugs for chemo prevention. And so we talk about vaccines in stage 4, vaccines in stage 3 and 2 and 1, and primary prevention. And then you also have to think that even when people study the role of diet and exercise, it's very hard to do a placebo because you cannot feed people. And it's also very unethical to do an organic versus McDonald's because it's just unethical. You can do that. So those studies are very hard to do, believe it or not. But the signals that we have from smaller non-randomized studies are that diet has a crucial role, that exercise has an amazing role. And exercise was compared because there are people that will be so happy to be randomized to the placebo, no exercise, right, Tracy? They will be very happy. Just put me in the placebo arm so I don't have to exercise. But those are interventions that were also studied, just like chemo prevention, tamoxifen in the risk reduction. You know, you give tamoxifen to half of the people and you give nothing to the rest of them. And then if the rate of breast cancer is higher on one side, then you know tamoxifen was effective. So that's how the prevention was also discovered. So through research, and it's always volunteer, you know, participation. Sometimes people can get a little stipends just to pay for getting to the doctor if there are extra visits. But in general, people don't do it for money. That's not the reason people do research or they get on a clinical trial. they feel this camaraderie. They feel like you did it for me, I do it for the next generation, you know? And that's how it goes. It pays forward, you know, it does pay forward, the research. So ask me questions. I want to have enough time for everybody to have their questions answered.
I'm going to start with the first question. So as like you said, and right before, I don't know if you heard me, I was talking about, 1995 or 84 when the BRCA gene was discovered, like how far research has come. Are there trials out there right now for like the future of like our next generation of children, like what's going to happen with them, a vaccine or oral medication? I know like years ago there was some talk about it and I haven't heard anything, and I figured you were the perfect person to ask.
What's happening to the vaccine, you said?
So do you know if they're developing a vaccine or developing?
That's for the breast cancer.
But just know if you don't have breast cancer and you just were BRCA positive.
So I don't think so. I don't know of any vaccine being worked on for a BRCA positive. I know they're working on trying to so the BRCA gene is supposed to protect us, right? That's the function of the BRCA gene. Right. And every one of us has it, right? So if it's malfunctioning, then you lose that protection. Right. So it's a lack of a gene function, basically. That's what the consequence is to develop the cancer. So there are ideas in looking at fixing the gene and making the gene functional and all that. There's just lots of things that are being attempted. I just don't know when that's gonna happen. But because the surgery is so effective in removing that risk, even though it's easier said than done, I'm sure, we talk about it like, oh, we have the solution here, remove your breast. Oh, thanks. I mean, it's just not so easy, especially before you complete your family. And it's just, breasts have their role, and we have breasts for a reason. So I know it's easy to say, hey, remove your breast and you're done with that risk. And I know ideally we would like to have interventions that minimize the risk. There's so much work that needs to happen in so many women to prove that, and for so long, that I just don't know if the efforts are even. I have to look into the BCRF to see if they're working on developing primary prevention in vaccine forms. Because even when you look at the tamoxifen and the aromatase inhibitors, they're very poorly studied. Even aromatase inhibitors, they haven't even studied them in the BRCA. And it just, why not? Because even if you cut the risk in half, it's not good enough. And I think that's why they're not even bothering that. Because if you have an 80% lifetime risk and you bring it to 40%, it's still way too high. It's still 3 times, almost 4 times higher than the normal risk. So I think because of that, they're just focusing on maybe treating, there's a lot of focus on treating breast cancer related BRCA genes and all that. But it would be nice to have some primary prevention, not have to have women remove their breast.
Like what's for the future coming, of our different generations, right? Like obviously I was found at an early age, but like other women are found earlier than I was. Like, so like of the next generation of a trial, of like just documenting, like that's why I've always looked for it. And I figured, tonight was the perfect opportunity to ask you to see like if there's anything down the gem line. Cause obviously, listen, I have kids, right? Both of them are 50%. And I see like all the PARP inhibitors, and I see obviously the true advancements in clinical trials. But it's interesting is like we see everything going for breast cancer, like, but what about the preventative side of it? Always catches me.
It's a very good question. And honestly, there's no studies around, no studies that ever come my way. Like 5 times a day, I get invited to join a study for treatment. But in prevention, I think it's little money, honestly. It's a lot of money to fund research like this. And the return, it's little money, right? So when you look at where the pharmaceutical companies, this is not bad mouthing anybody, but where the money is going right now is finding the treatments for those with breast cancer, So I am gonna look to see, I'm gonna speak with somebody at City of Hope to see if they have anything in the pipeline coming. And because we have such a large population of families affected by the BRCA gene, it would be nice to have, and we have the geneticists, so we have a whole division of genetics at that it's a luxury to have. And I'll speak with Dr. Forgani about, or Dr. Takim, to see if they can find in the country any study that we can participate. I would love to have one. I would definitely love to have one.
Just collecting data, you know, it just blows my mind, like on the data that's out there when you research, like you said, you know, there's PARP inhibitors, there's if you have breast cancer and the BRCA gene or the PALP or any of the genes, you know, HER2, any mutation that you have or cancer. So it caught my attention to say,
no, it's a very good question. The collecting the data, we know the risk. Like, look, even the genes that we know they increase the risk, the PALP2 gene, the BARD, the recommendation when you look at the guidelines, they're not standard recommendations. They take decades to come up with the recommendation of bilateral mastectomy for a BRCA gene. And we've known about these genes almost for like 5, 6, 7 years now. And the collection of the data and the charts to really quantify somebody's risk and tell them what to do about that would be nice to have a primary prevention. Anybody with an increased risk, but we do have that. We have the primary prevention. Anybody with an increased risk, you have tamoxifen or premenopausal, it cuts the risk in half. Okay, so it depends on where you start with that cut the risk in half. It's not good enough, you know, but it's there. It's a primary prevention. It can be used. Aromatase inhibitors, it cuts the risk almost to 65% for the ER positive. And the exemestane has some ER negative risk reduction as well. So the rest of the medication just cut the risk of the ER positive. Well, the BRCA one has triple negative, most of it. So it's not going to help with that. We don't really have primary prevention for triple negative breast cancers. We don't. So it's a long way to go, but these are essential things that we need to get to it, because not everybody had an opportunity to know about the BRCA gene before they got pregnant. Not everybody had an opportunity to do assisted reproductive fertility and select the embryos that don't have the BRCA gene. Everybody's worried about having a kid that potentially could have the gene mutation and then what the future looks like, you know. And as a mom, you don't want to start the conversation when the first time that you can have that conversation by sharing that with your kids. Now, I know that you have very brave kids and they're already ready to do whatever it takes. I know that. But it's still something that it's a definitely unmet need. And you know what, Tracy, we'll follow up with this. And maybe we can have a conversation with the geneticist. I can connect her with you. Definitely. And we can look at any prevention trials that we have in the country. And we don't have them at Sylvester, I know that. Memorial doesn't have them because I was there. Baptist doesn't have them. So locally, I don't know of any.
There's none. I search on clinicaltrials.gov all the time.
I don't know of any, to be honest with you, but potentially the ones we don't see on clinicaltrials.gov are the ones that are local, small, you know, so City of Hope, where they have a big genetics department, maybe they're working on something. And as they expand, then maybe we can become a site. But I'll keep you engaged in that conversation to see if we can find something that, or if not, we can think about starting one here, you know.
It's like a basic, you know, something where we have information. Like there's a platform that I use now, but basically it's called My Gene Council. But what it does is they send you like updated testing and guidelines and information on like when your child should get tested or all this, but there's no like.
There's a lot of them,
you know,
but there's nothing in prevention. I know a friend of mine at Methodist was working on olive oil as a preventive strategy. The question is, if you have somebody with the BRCA gene, she has to, number one, not be willing to do the surgery and just do the surveillance. And honestly, many women don't want to take the risk. They just don't. If they're gonna be, they're gonna be for a few years until they complete their families. And after that, they just don't want to take the chance of just having the breast sitting there and waiting. But throughout the nation, we'll find enough people that will not be willing to remove their breast, you know, if you go globally. So yeah, well, that's something that is definitely worth exploring.
Perfect. Thank
Um,
you. Go ahead, Tam.
I have a question, Dr. Calfa. Thank you so much for being with us this evening. So I'm BRCA1 positive. I'm a 2-time ovarian cancer survivor. And recently my cousin was diagnosed with breast cancer, and we checked the genes. We have the same gene. But in my mother's side of the family, the gene is from my father's side. My mother had multiple myeloma. And I found out another family member of mine also had multiple myeloma. And another friend of mine that has the BRCA gene also has a family member with multiple myeloma. Have there been any studies or anything that connects that with the BRCA gene? Because it's very strange that it's so prevalent.
Not that I know of. And it's interesting. So now the question is, are they, so from
So it's
the
weird that cancer is on both sides of my family, very heavy. My mother died of multiple myeloma, but I clearly I know that I get the gene from my father's side because my cousin on my father's side just got diagnosed with breast cancer and had her surgery, and we checked our genes and we have the same gene. So I know it's from my father's side, but other people in my family that have the BRCA gene have it's a bunch of people also have multiple myeloma, but it's never connected, at least when they talk to us about it. And it's very strange that it's not so many people.
Yeah, it's very, and you know what, it could be that, who knows, we learn every day we learn something about these genes, honestly. I mean, you see families that they have 100 family members and everybody had breast cancer, and you test 100 genes and you find nothing. There has to be a gene there, and these correlations, the more they get reported back, the more they get, then the association is being made. Just like the Lynch syndrome with the colon cancer. At the beginning, they weren't recognizing that the Lynch syndrome has an increased breast cancer. Some people still argue that that's not true. And it's actually true, but it's just starting to being reported for the reasons you're mentioning. You have several family members in the colon cancer that have breast cancer, then they get back reported by the geneticist. So the one entry point is, in a family like yours, I will make an appointment with a geneticist. I don't know if you get your treatment at Sylvester or where, and then have them make the pedigree. And then there is a database in the country that they report back. Like Tracy was saying, there are a lot of platforms that collect this information, and new cancers become associated with genes, with old genes. So that's how the advance is being made.
Can you have the gene on both sides of your family?
Yeah.
And so does that increase your risk? Because it's so heavy on both sides. I just found out a cousin of mine had vulva cancer. I didn't know about until yesterday.
Yeah.
So, it seems to be, so both sides of the family have such heavy.
Yeah. It adds up. It definitely adds up. I mean, you can have BRCA1 from both parents, but through DNA, you can find out which one it comes from, if you really need to know. But is one BRCA1 worse than having both parents with the BRCA1 and still having a BRCA1? I don't think you can say that, But I've seen patients with the BRCA1 from one parent, with the BRCA2 from the other parent.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
And I've seen patients with a mom that was BRCA positive, with a sister that was BRCA positive, and then the daughter didn't have it, and the daughter developed bilateral breast cancer, and she still doesn't have any of the genes. Yeah. So the truth about the genes is that it's such a young field, really, and even though a lot was discovered from '94 to now, and we have now so many genes, we make firm recommendations only in the BRCA1 and 2. The rest of it is still like, cautious, proceed with that, increase risk, add an MRI, So the good things are that, for ovarian cancer, there's just very poor screening. And that's why those ovaries, the minute you're done with them, unfortunately, they need to be removed, and that causes early menopause. And it's no fun about that, but the ovaries are even harder, than the breast to be imaged, and to be good about that. So the things that we know about, we can do something about. The rest of it, you just say that in a family like the P53 genes. P53 gene is the Li-Fraumeni syndrome. The person can have cancer from the eyeballs to the toenails in every part of the body, and they happen a lot. I have patients with Lynch syndrome. They had 6 primary cancers. 6.
Wow.
This is the 6th one that she's just had with me. And truth, honestly, she caught them all early, and she's had 6 curative intent treatments. And with God will, I mean, she'll be all right. But we've been chasing parts of the body constantly because they're like on fire. You know, the cancer can just happen anytime, and it can happen to any of us. You know, we just have to trust that you find a good team, that you're having your surveillance. In a way, honestly, about the BRCA gene, in a way, at least you know what's wrong with it. At least you know the things you need to do. At least you know that you remove that and you remove that and you start quantifying risk and you get to better odds than people that have no idea what's wrong with them, you know? So in a way, I look at it like there is something that you know is wrong. There is a lot you can do about it. And once you do that, you have a normal life, and the odds of being alive are equal to the non-BRCA carriers. So that's the good part about it. And then we know the most about it. And then your kids, you know, are going to be, by then, we'll have more treatments, and we'll have prevention, and we'll have all these things. And by then, if you remove a breast, you know, before the cancer happened, now you see it's nipple sparing mastectomy. People don't have radical surgeries anymore. You go in, you remove the breast tissue. It's almost like you leave the shell, you put an implant in there, you can have the same time, the same surgery, looks like it was before. And it's not ideal, but it's a very good alternative, you know? You, in a BRCA patient, you can remove the ovaries, and if it was never affected, you actually can give estrogen back to the person. So you can bring back the estrogen that you take away, and you can make the most of it with basically just being brave and strong, and like you all have been.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have any questions? So before we close out, I just want to say, maybe Dr. Calfa, if you want to highlight like 3 takeaways that we can give these women out there about like why women should participate in clinical trials for breast cancer.
Yeah, so the number one reason is that you have access to drugs that haven't been approved yet, and that can be a lifesaver. There are patients that live with stage 4, and because they're able to participate in trials, they're alive, you know, twice as long as their odds initially were, and they're still alive, and they still haven't gotten the standard treatment. They're going from one trial to another. So the moral to that is that you have access to drugs that haven't been approved yet, and you can increase the number of drugs that you have available, and you can double those, or you can whatever, take advantage of that research, and it can make you be alive until the next research trial comes and shows you something else. So in stage 4, it's a no-brainer. In the curative setting, as long as you don't compromise the standard of care, and you get the best that it could be, adding another drug to your standard of care has more benefit than risk in general. And by doing that, you increase your odds of being cured. And then the last thing is, if you trust the science, and we're not going to open a political debate, but if you trust the science, there is a lot of regulations, a lot of work that go in before that brings a lot of confidence that that trial is sound. And if anything, even if it's not going to be helpful, at least it's not harmful. But it's always, you know, and then obviously the advances that were made were through research, and the research is the reason that we are where we are, and we can move forward and hope to have a day when we're not going to have this conversation. We're just going to have margarita at 5 o'clock somewhere and not talk about breast cancer.
I agree, right? That sounds awesome. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing all this imperative information with our community. We're truly grateful for your time and your dedication, and always making yourself so available for BRCA Strong. We're so lucky to have you come on and speak. And Myra, thank you so much for coming on, for support tonight again, and truly at awe of how much you guys do for us, and we're super grateful.
That's awesome. Well, you have a good night, ladies, and keep up the great, strong determination and motivation. And you all inspire us. Honestly, we wouldn't be at 7 o'clock at night, Myra and I, without having a bite today. You know, talking to you all. We know that every one of you is going to go out and help others. And Tracy, just doing your rides and your runs and through chemo, you just inspire so many. I'm sure everyone that was just running along with you, literally, had their exams done, you know, and I'm sure by what each one of you is doing, you are saving lives. And I'm going to tell you, Vanessa is not going to tell you what she does, but Vanessa figured out that there are girls out there and kids that, you know, go through cancer treatment, and she made a passion of just trying to lift them up and bring a smile on those kids' faces. And I'll have Vanessa tell you in a minute what she does, because what she does, I think you're gonna love what she does. And we can all go and have dinner after that. So Vanessa, it's too good not to share that story, and I just wanted you to be able to share that story with them.
Hi, ladies. I'm a 3-year cancer survivor. Last week was my cancer anniversary, and I'm so happy that I'm blessed. I feel like so blessed. Like, thank you, Mayra and Dr. Calfa, you're angels here on earth. So I designed a chemotherapy doll, which is a ball doll. And those dolls are manufactured in Venezuela. And I give jobs to artisan women. And Venezuela is, you know, going through a very tough situation, political and economical. So I give jobs to this woman, and the dolls are brought here to the United States. And for every doll sold, one chemotherapy doll is donated to a child with cancer or alopecia. You know, some girls suffer from alopecia that comes from genetics. And yeah, that's my passion now. So I bring, my dolls are brought here to the United States. I sell the dolls here, and all the money goes to these kids. And I bring I put a smile on their faces.
That's an amazing project. Are you on Instagram or Facebook?
Yes, I'm gonna
connect. Definitely send a message if you could connect, and then
the dolls are adorable. She brought me a bigger doll and a smaller doll, and I have them in my office, so I can share them with you. But yeah, it's just something cool. And then I see the girls when they get the dolls. I see the girls because she posts, and then there are little girls that they take the doll and they say, "Look, mommy, I'm so pretty, like this ball doll." It's really cool. So each one of you has your strengths that you didn't even know you had them. Vanessa never saw herself making dolls, and Tracy, you probably didn't think you can run through what I'm doing to you, right? You didn't think you're gonna run through that. And then Tamara, I don't know what you're able to do, but I can tell you're able to do a lot just by looking at you.
It's interesting. Tammy's part of my board. Actually, she's one of our board members, and she also is working on Monday with the Hollywood Chamber, the Breast 365. So Tammy put all that together with us, with Dr. Frill and Dr. Friedman.
Yeah. And then Myra gives herself like 300% of herself. And you look at Myra and you say, honestly, Myra has more energy than anybody in that office. She's just like one of those lollipop dolls that never gets exhausted. But yes, so keep up your spirits, and it's just empowering, and I know we can do amazing magic things together. So you all have a good night, go eat something, and hug your kids, and then we'll see each other soon. Okay,
perfect. Thank you, Dr. Calfa. Have a great night.
Thank you so much.
You too. Bye.
Bye.